Hey guys, I'm making this video as a guide not only to explain how to top lane Akali, but how to snowball top lane as Akali and literally crush the enemy laner. This video is going to show me playing Akali, but some of the concepts are very similar for other top lane champions with any kill potential. The runes and masteries will be at the end, but other than having flat armor yellows against most AD champions you face, and making sure you have Thunderlords as your keystone mastery, it's really all about preference, but more importantly your rank and the skill level of your enemies. The first thing I want to say is that the most important key to playing top lane Akali is to try to dominate minion wave control by letting your opponent push you in and then freezing the minion wave near your tower. Doing this makes your lane way easier to play as it makes it much harder for you to get ganked. You have your Q and E to help you last it under tower easier, and the enemy top laner won't be able to spam harass you because they will be too overextended and at risk of dying to ganks. But on that note, if your enemy top laner is not only pushing you into tower, but harassing you while you CS under tower, you need to be spam pinging for your jungler and mid to help you. Those types of enemy top laners are making a giant mistake by overextending so hard, because if your jungler isn't complete trash like a Warwick main that only farms until level 6, it should be very easy to get a kill, or at least burn their flash and condition them to realize that they aren't immune to ganks, which will in turn relieve a ton of pressure from you. So the first thing you should notice is that I started Cloth Armor with 4 potions, whereas the enemy Gnar started Doran's Blade with 1 potion. Right away I know that if I don't make any terrible trades, I should be able to win the lane by withering down Gnar by taking every opportunity I get to throw my Q on him, throw a Shroud between us, and run through the Shroud to proc not only Q, but Thunderlords. Oh, and also I E them while I run away if I can. I can keep doing this until he either has to go back while I get to shove in a wave or 2 for free, or he dies because he's too greedy to go back. At the start of the lane from level 1 to 2, especially against ranged champions, you want to be last hitting creeps from a safe distance with your Q. However, some enemy top laners aren't that aggressive, so you might be able to get away with last hitting with auto attacks. Basically, just make sure you don't take 3 autos for 1 creep, or eventually the poke will add up and you will find yourself losing the lane really fast. Another side note is that if you ever get the chance, try to throw your Q on a minion and explode it so that you can get a few health points back from your spell vamp from your passive. This is part of the reason why some Master and Challenger Akali players take flat 80 reds to increase the spell vamp from their passive. So around the time you're level 3 to 5, you're either going to have abused a bad enemy by poking them to the point where they're low and don't have a potion, or you're in a stalemate lane where you're probably down a few CS. If you're able to find a chance to kill them pre-6 and pre-Hextech Revolver, that's great, you probably don't need this guide too much. If you're in a stalemate lane where you're down a few CS, that's fine too, because that's generally how Akali works against good players. If you're having to go back before level 6, and before you can buy a Hextech Revolver, chances are you're overvaluing trying to get every last creep, and you're getting harassed too much as a result, making you miss more creeps and experience than you would have if you just played safer to begin with. If this is the case, you need to sit further back, you need to use more spells to farm from a safer distance, and you need to accept that you're a pre-6 Akali and you will never get perfect CS unless you're against a terrible player. Now for the fun part, level 6 and beyond. If you manage to get level 6 before you recall and start gathering dashes while you head back to lane, you are set to win almost every matchup. There are a few ways to kill the enemy, and it all just depends on how safely they play. If you're able to get a Q, wait for the cooldown for your Q to come back up, ult the enemy and then get 2 Qs off, you're lucky, because clearly you're against someone who doesn't know how Akali works. But more likely, you're going to have to get to lane, wait for the enemy to be in range of your ult them in Q auto, and either run away with your Shroud or finish them off if you think you have the damage to. The most important part of post 6 Akali laning until you get Gunblade is that you are always looking at the cooldowns of your Thunderlords and Hextech Revolver. Being able to Q auto and having both Hextech Revolver and Thunderlords go off is so overpowered, it's my favorite part about playing Akali in lane. Basically, get your Revolver and Thunderlords proc on the enemy, and you will have all the lane control in the world because of how chunked the enemy will be. Add in a pink ward to help spot the enemy jungler in mid, and you have essentially one top lane. The enemy either won't be able to get any farm if you freeze the wave at your tower, or if they're champions like Gnar, they will be able to get one in a few because they have long range spells to help them. Akali's post 6 with Revolver has such an incredible amount of kill potential that you can completely remove an enemy top laner from the game if you get a good snowball going. Even in cases where the enemy is staying far away, but just in range to at least soak up experience, You can ult to an enemy minion and then ult onto the enemy champion after, proc your Q/Thunderlord/Revolver, and then either W away or ult a third time to safety if you're under their tower. So that's pretty much it for playing top lane as Akali. The only other thing I can think about mentioning is to at least think about using your trinket ward or buying a pink ward to help you spot out the enemy jungler mid. If the enemies are good enough, you might get baited into overextending and getting ganked, but even then it's pretty hard to kill an Akali with her shroud, dashes, and flash, unless they brought an early pink ward with them to spot you in your shroud. This is pretty common laning knowledge, but I figured I would mention it anyways. Now let's talk about runes and masteries really quick. I'm not going to show you guys a build for you to copy and paste because there's a few things you need to consider adjusting towards your specific rank and experience with Akali. Starting with runes, there's a high yellow controversy between using hybrid penetration reds and flat AD reds, but the way I see it is that hybrid penetration reds will make you do more damage late game, but flat AD reds will make your laning a lot easier, as you can not only last hit under tower easier by having stronger auto attacks and ease, but you also get 1% extra spell vamp per 6 AD, which will definitely add up in lane and may make the difference between winning a lane and losing it against stronger opponents. Before I say what I think most people should use, I want to mention that you should try out all the different builds for yourself and see what fits you personally. But anyways, my recommendation is that if you're new to Akali and/or bronze to gold and haven't played more than 10 games of Akali in the past few months, I'd recommend using flat AD reds to help you lane easier, as you likely aren't going to be immediately skilled enough to perfectly execute all of the strategy I just talked about, and if you are a plat or higher, you shouldn't be playing champions in ranked you don't know how to begin with, so I will assume you know how to play Akali. Because top laners micromanage every aspect of the game better at plat and diamond, you're probably going to want the extra early game help with flat AD reds too. So for hybrid penetration reds, that leaves experienced colleague mains that are either bronze, silver, or gold. These ranks are where I've noticed people don't play as cautiously of Akali's damage as they should be and will often take bad or terrible trades in lane. Because it is much easier for an experienced Akali to win lanes up to gold, you can get away with using hybrid penetration runes and will be an absolute mid-game god with Gunblade, finding yourself having 15 kills within 30 minutes. As for blues, I think the standard is to go flat MR against AP champions, and scaling MR against AD tops that still have AP mids that will kill you late game. So that is what I'll recommend, but at the same time, I usually like to have flat AP blues because it helps me get earlier kills in lane, and I'm extremely confident in my laning as Akali against pretty much every matchup. But once again, mess around with your runes and see what works with you. Okay, now finally masteries. I'm just going to talk about the ones that aren't completely obvious, but you may want to pause the video really quick and pull up the masteries page in your client. I personally always go 12-18-0 because I think both Bounty Hunter and Thunderlords are extremely OP as a good Akali, but if you're new, I consider going 0-18-12 and get some defensive stats from the Resolve Mastery tree. Anyways, for masteries and ferocity, I recommend Double-Edged Sword over Feast because you get 3% extra damage, which will translate into more health being healed from your spell vamp, as well as the fact that you do 3% extra permanent damage, which is just insanely strong all around. Also, I personally like Natural Talent because it isn't all scaling. It gives you 2 AD and 3 AP at level 1. As for the Cunning Mastery tree, some people like Wandering for roaming speed, some people like Savagery for last hitting help. I personally prefer Savagery because the worst thing in the world as Akali is having to go back before you get your revolver, and I want to make sure I have the gold to get it. Also, it should be obvious for most people, but I like Dangerous Game over Bandit because of how deep Akali has to go in teamfights to kill people. But I'll mention one last time, you should consider crafting up your own mastery page. Thank you for watching, and I will be sure to have more in-depth guides out soon. If you liked the video, please leave a like. Also, I really appreciate your comments with either feedback or just letting me know you liked the video, as it motivates me to do more videos for you guys. If you love Akali and want to be involved in discussions about her, be sure to check out reddit.com/r/AkaliMains, and the link will be down in the description. Thank you.